The views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the hosts and guests, and not necessarily those of the staff or management of Worldwide Digital Broadcasting Corporation.
Knowledge is power, and this is powerful stuff. Wellness Education Cannabis Advocates of Nevada present the We Can 702 Nevada Cannabis News Hour with the We Can radio team. For the next 60 minutes, we'll take an in-depth look at the cannabis reform revolution sweeping the nation. Now, let's fire up the news hour. Here is the We Can radio team.
Welcome to the Nevada Cannabis News Hour. I'm Perry Haichu, and this is my co-host Michael McAuliffe. And today we have a very special guest, our good friend of the show and friend of Weekend, Bruce Gale, attorney at law. How you doing, Mr.
Pot attorney at law.
It's been a while.
Thank you very much for having me again on your show.
Well, thank you for taking the time to be with us this afternoon.
Absolutely. We've got a lot of local stuff, and we'd love to hear your take on some of these things. There's been a lot going on in the past week from the LCB, the Legislative Council Bureau, and reactions to it. And let me lead off with a story from September 11th with Carlton Lockhead at the RJ. The article is titled, "Nevada Local Governments Have Okay to License Marijuana Lounges." And what they are saying here is an opinion from the Legislative Council Bureau released on Monday said that no state law prohibits local governments from permitting marijuana consumption in businesses. And a friend of the show and father of pot in Nevada, Tick Sagerblom, said, "I really believe that Nevada can be the marijuana capital of the world." Go Tick. And this will be one more thing in our toolbox. Andrew Jolly, CEO of the Source Dispensaries and president of the Nevada Dispensary Association, said that the opinion is a step in the right direction. He said that we have to be able to give tourists an option rather than a blanket statement that it is just not allowed on the Strip. That sounds pretty common sense. These people are buying it. They're coming from out of state. What do you think the legal situation is for out-of-state people who come in and buy their legal amount of cannabis? What option does that really give them?
Well, right now they don't have much. They're really pot smokers without a home.
Exactly, without a home. And so if you have people coming into the state and they're staying at a hotel or an RV camp or something like that, then that doesn't really fit the definition of home. And so these people are all outside of coverage of Nevada law. And yet this was considered to be a key factor in the passage of the law. Everybody was taking those tourist dollars into account for those big numbers.
Of course.
And there's a prohibition against consuming it in public view or on public property. So they don't have.
I hear the fines are pretty stiff also, somewhere between $500 and $600, I hear.
It's $600.
That's a lot of money.
So let me ask you, if you bring up consumption in public view, is that why they will ticket people who might be smoking in their vehicle, engine off, keys out, and all that sort of stuff?
Yes.
That's because even though they're in their private vehicle, they are considered in public view.
Yes.
If they're not on their own private property, I guess.
I think you could be on private property, have very dark tinted windows, and have your shield on the windshield. That might suffice.
Oh, those really dark tinted windows. You mean like the ones that Metro uses? Okay. That's
or
fine.
the pristine pillar of the community untainted by criminality.
Oh, okay, them too. Steve Sisolak, chairman of the Clark County Commission, in this article said that I do feel that it's very important for the people who are coming from out of town, the tourists, which are a big contributor to the industry's business, I'm told, to have a place where they can safely and legally consume the product. Still, he's not sure how it'll look in Clark County. He said, "I'd want to make sure that any of the marijuana being consumed was purchased from a licensed dispensary or grown in a home that has a license, not illegally obtained product." And I've just got to wonder, we've come from the point of Nevada being 2 seeds is a felony, to a medical marijuana law, to a decade plus later having medical dispensaries, and now rec, and yet I'm sure not picking on Commissioner Sisolak. I see this view in government at all, that they're still worried about, oh my God, we've got to curb this illegal marijuana use or this or that.
Yeah.
It astounds me because whatever is happening there, I would think, is going to be an ever diminishing slice of that market as you have more and more legal means.
I think it's the, how do I put this? Not the brainwashing, just the disproportionate amount of time that marijuana has been illegal. It's hard for people to wrap their heads around that still. Like, people are still kind of coming to grips with that. So they're just kind of defaulting back and not really realizing, like, look, like, we're allowed to talk about this now. We're allowed to go forward with this now. And it's almost like they're not even, it hasn't processed quite fully yet.
So they're using the same old tropes and arguments, even
it's
though...
It's not even the same old tropes and arguments. Like, I think that Sisolak isn't necessarily against it. He just hasn't really come to the realization, like, this is a possibility yet. Like, this is all new. We're writing the book on this. It's not like we can look to a whole bunch of other municipalities and say, well, look at all these things that they have done. There's only really one place in the world that's ever done it, and it's Amsterdam. So...
And even there, pot was never legalized. It was decriminalized for personal use amounts, small amounts of cannabis.
And the industry has kind of developed itself, exactly, and they kind of had to deal with it. This is a whole new world, so I understand a little bit of. They're a little cautious, but it's a good thing for everyone at the end of the day.
Well,
there'll be a lot of money in it.
County Commissioner Lawrence Weekly said that the smell of marijuana smoking lounges needs to be taken into account when location of them is considered. Well, either that or good filtration systems,
a little bit
which
of both,
work.
Sure. I mean, they can accommodate that if that's what you're worried about. That's a fairly easy thing to fix, I would like to think. They have smoke eaters in all the bars and things like that. Well, that might happen.
Well, Commissioner Weekly said that for those who have families, it depends on where you put these things. It's all still unknown, and as we work through it, I hope that those out there who have more education and experience will work with us. And speaking for all of us, we surely will. And, you know, I think he's got an absolutely valid concern. But that being said, I don't think you're going to find most of these smoking lounges being tucked deep into neighborhoods anywhere. I think the money is going to go for these in the more commercial, obviously the more touristy sectors, but even going after the locals, I think you might find this thing, in the district down in Henderson, a big commercial shopping area, or over by one of the malls or something like that.
Okay, I'm not so sure that a lot of the city councils will be so willing to grant that right away in their favorite places. Like, I don't know if the city of Las Vegas would be too happy if I wanted to put one in Tivoli Village or in Boca Park, because they really look at that as a good revenue source for them. And if they really, like, maybe families who are a little more conservative may not want to bring their kids through that shopping center if they know there's a marijuana smoking lounge there or something. So, like, I'm not exactly sure how, because I don't have kids, but maybe that would be something that they would be concerned with. So what I would think is they'd be attached to dispensaries.
Yeah.
Like, because the dispensary owners would want to try to grab that revenue right away. If they have the room, of course. Like, they would want to get both streams of revenue. They want to get it from smoking, from buying it, and then they want to have them smoke it at a lounge that's attached to their store. Maybe they can sell swag there, or like t-shirts or whatever the hell they'll be selling there.
But Bruce, let me ask you, didn't the initiative state that there was not going to be any on-premise consumption? No, you have it wrong. I'm sorry, I didn't fully explain myself. Okay. Think back a few years to when the county, I forgot if it was the county or the state that had that law that said that if you were serving food, you couldn't smoke at the same place. So they had a lot of bars had to retrofit and kind of put in the dividers and had the whole restaurant / bar section. It was a real pain in the ass. Right.
Like, imagine you have something like that, but to a different level. Like, I'm thinking of a business. It's called the Aloha Kitchen, and it's next to the Still Smoking Shop where the old Circuit City Shopping Center used to be on Sahara and Decatur. When you walk in, there's a bar next door, but you have to go through a glass door that has the black glass where you can't see it, and you have to go. It's a completely separate business license, same owners, different suite. So you can separate the businesses and have it be by the same owner.
I'm not sure whether that's going to work, and I know others are thinking about it. The article mentioned Andrew Jolly over at The Source, and of course his investment group wound up buying that entire commercial corner on Rainbow and Sahara, the southeast corner, where they have The Source. They're putting in a sandwich shop chain called Chiba Hut, which is terrific food. I've eaten at another one. There are other offices going on in Canna related businesses. I think someplace like them with multi storefronts in there and just one shopping center would be able to do this. However, I'm not so sure that a dispensary could just carve out some space and try and say it's a separate area.
Next door.
Yeah.
Like if you're at Euphoria or something, they have like a little Chinese restaurant or a Vietnamese restaurant next door. They would have to buy them out of their lease and get them out of there if it was even legal.
What do you think?
This is my prediction on the issue. The local jurisdictions, Clark County, City of Las Vegas, City of North Las Vegas, and Henderson, they went through a lot of time and effort regarding their zoning and land use and business licensing regulations and where they would allow and have allowed dispensaries. I think these consumption lounges are going to be very, very close proximity to where the existing dispensaries are, because the local jurisdictions were already satisfied that was an adequate location, balancing the interest of the public and everyone else. And number two, the dispensaries, they're going to want to some extent be vertically integrated. They want to make it easy they have a sale of marijuana, and they're vertically integrated. They have a consumption lounge, maybe adjacent or the same strip center or very close proximity to the dispensary.
It's another draw to that dispensary because you can buy and try in short order.
If that's true, think of somewhere like Essence right on Las Vegas Boulevard. That's going to be unbelievable.
Potentially, yeah.
Potentially it is. Now we have another article on the same subject written by Michelle Rindels from the Nevada Independent, and she managed to talk to Tick Segerblom and also Christian Kiliani, and Tick told her in this article that I think that the local officials, at least the ones I've heard from, were saying we don't want to get out in front of this thing unless we have something from the state saying we can do it. We're just going to sit on our hands, and I can confirm that in a meeting not too long ago with business licensing, where they said that the commissioners had no interest in moving forward on this issue at this time. So in part, Tick went ahead and requested this letter from the LCB for clarification on it because he felt that he had the right position, and they are backing him up. He said it's really going to be up to the local governments, but I'm hopeful that they'll start to look at this and basically experiment with different ways to provide public use. And I'm sure, come the 2018 elections, when I hear Tick is running for Chris G's seat, if he gets into that commission district, District E is going to be a very cannabis-friendly district, no doubt about it. So Clark County Commissioner Christian Kiliani said that the opinion gave her confidence in moving forward with discussions on marijuana lounges. She said that she's asking that the issue be discussed at a commission meeting next Tuesday, where county leaders could start crafting the outlines of a lounge policy. I said, this is a no-brainer. We have the authority to do it. We're the largest county. Let's do it right, and let's have that discussion, Commissioner Giuliani said in the interview. So there seems to be a good local reception to this, at least in Clark County. Of course, I don't expect that Henderson is going to continue in that direction because they've been dragging their feet on this issue all along. I do believe that North Las Vegas will jump on it quickly because they need the income.
So business licensing says they won't give the go-ahead until the state says yes.
Well, yes, but that was in a meeting probably, I want to say 2 months ago now. And so in that time,
things have changed.
Tick has gone to the LCB and has gotten this opinion. Now, there is a lot of coverage on this. The governor is saying that he doesn't like this idea, and he's very much against it. Yeah,
that's kind of the next piece of this puzzle. Governor Sandoval came out in an opinion and got on television and kind of said, hey, I didn't support him previously. I don't support them now. He thinks that this is going to invite federal scrutiny with regard to the sale of the recreational cannabis and things of that nature. He thinks it's way too early to be jumping into something like this, and that it's important. He wants to see how the sale process goes of recreational before, he wants to see how this newly recreational cannabis thing plays out over the next couple of years before we jump into consumption lounges.
The governor's obviously a very intelligent, very well-educated man, and it wouldn't seem to me that it would be beyond his ability to grasp having a bunch of moving parts first. I mean, we wouldn't want to say that Nevada needs to diversify its economy because we've only got mining and tourism, but if we're going to go to solar, well, we ought to wait till we have mining and tourism fully fixed first, and then go into solar, and then maybe go into something else. The idea that that he says that we need to, polish off everything that we've done first before tackling an on-site consumption lounge, to me.
Maybe he
Underestimates the ability of the people we have working in the state and the county to get these things done.
Yeah.
Well, Governor Sandoval also talked about, he feels a need that there's a need for statutory authority, and he doesn't trust the local jurisdictions to do it. If there's this other statement here that in this article, so the local jurisdictions they did a fine job. Some of them better than others, and they finally got with the program. But back to the federal issue, let's talk about Jefferson. And in that regard, I don't mean Thomas Jefferson.
Okay.
I mean our
Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III,
a.k.a. Jeff Sessions, our illustrious Attorney General for the United States. There's the Cole memo. So if these consumption lounges are consistent with the Cole memo, why should there be a paranoia of federal intervention?
Because paranoia runs deep in the heartland, especially here in Nevada. I recall the 2001 legislature where the assembly decided they were not going to enact dispensaries at that time, specifically because they were afraid that the Bush administration, then under John Walters, was going to come into Nevada and tear things up. And the feeling in Nevada, and I guess a lot of the western states, is we don't want the federal government messing in our business, and they were operating out of an abundance of caution then, and they seem to be expressing the same sentiment years later, different administration, different time in history.
Same story, different day.
So anyway, hey, we're going to take a real quick break, and we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Joe Peroni.
And I'm Heidi Mancini, and we're the hosts of the Rise Above show. Check us out on WWDB.TV on Thursday afternoons at 2 p.m.
Continuing on with our Nevada news, we see that that where there's money and there's no place to safely put it, aka a bank vault, you will always have people going out there and trying to get that money. And we seem to have had a string of robberies here. And we've got a report from Channel 3 News called High Crimes Las Vegas Pot Shops Targeted by Criminals. What do you think about this stuff, Bruce?
Well, let me read some sections of the article. I don't think it's any surprise that, like you said, where there's cash, there's going to be criminal activity. Yeah. Criminal activity will be afoot. That's somewhat of a famous quote in a famous case. But anyway, Supreme Court of the United States decision on criminal law, criminal procedure. But anyway, a News 3 review of crime data in the Las Vegas Valley found that there have been at least 26 burglaries and one armed robbery at marijuana dispensaries since January 2016. A surge of crimes were reported as Nevada prepared for the first recreational pot sales, which began on July 1st, 2017. Criminals are getting bolder as they target dozens of pot shops in the Las Vegas area. From an organized heist, which led to a police shooting, to an armed robbery with a masked man holding a patient hostage briefly. Robert Casillas quoted saying, "They were hitting multiple dispensaries in Southern California on their way through. They made a pleasant stop in Nevada here with us. They got less than $400, said Robert Casillas, who is the managing director for Cannucopia.
Well, and that's understandable, because with all that cash around, I imagine every MME in town, whether it's cultivation, production, they're buying and selling their product in cash on the large side. I'm sure they all have procedures in place to get cash off of those locations as quickly as possible.
Well, they do. But what's also remarkable, or somewhat newsworthy, is according to a review of Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department records, Cornucopia has been targeted 4 times since January 1st,
Oh, my.
2016. So why is, out of all the dispensaries in Clark County, Cornucopia?
I would wonder where they are. I mean, I think that, for example, I would think that a dispensary down on Industrial or Western or along Lake Mead Boulevard might have a better chance of being hit than someplace that is up around Summerlin or something like that.
I saw him on the local news recently, and the piece stated that Cornucopia is in the southwest part of the valley.
Southwest. All right.
Which, was a very highly, fairly affluent, growing, exciting area of the
Rainbow
valley.
and Sunset.
Rainbow, yeah. Okay, that's
not
kind
exactly-
That's not a troubled area.
No.
That's very interesting.
No, someone's got their eye on that place.
So it's interesting the way that the news sensationalizes things, and in this case we have Channel 3, which went from being owned by Jim Rogers, who was a very progressive guy, to being owned now by the Sinclair media group, which is one of the most socially conservative broadcasters in the country. And so they're calling this showing that they're trying to call alarm to this. And 26 burglaries does sound like a lot, but actually, as we're looking at it, from January 2016, now we're talking about 20 months, essentially. And we're talking, yes, it seems like a lot, but there is really no baseline to compare because none of these places were open 2 or 3 or 4 years ago.
1 a month seems like enough. Or a lot.
Well, it's more than enough. I don't think it's quite an epidemic, though. I think it's cause for concern. I think that everybody in the industry and law enforcement who are saying, no, don't do these because, they're going to be crime there. Well, there's always going to be some level of crime.
I would think it would hit these businesses especially hard because I can't imagine these guys are insured for that product like a normal business.
No, I'm
like
sure
if
they're not.
if your truck gets hit as you're transporting this, you just eat it.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's they don't have that fallback like most businesses do, in addition to all the other expenses they're incurring because of the tax codes and all kinds of crazy stuff. It's just another kick in the pants for them.
But I would think that it does seem to be let me call it lazy criminality, which is a good thing because almost all of this is just burglaries. People who are and burglaries don't necessarily mean the Thomas Crown affair and or Tom Cruise going in a bodysuit or something like that. A lot of this, I mean, there was a case at the Blackjack dispensary where they were trying to use a crowbar just to rip some bars off or something like that. So it doesn't mean they're very sophisticated crime. We'll see what happens. But it's something to keep watching. And another quick note to wrap up our Nevada coverage today. We've got Metric replacing MJ Freeway leaf data systems in Nevada. And this is from newcannabisventures.com, written by Alan Brockstein, CFA, who caught that the state has sent out a letter to all the MMEs saying that as of, I think it says November 1st of this year, that the MJ Freeway leaf data systems will be replaced by this new Metric seed-to-sale tracking. And why should any of you care for this? This is a business thing. Well, the move comes just 18 months after leaf data systems was selected by Nevada in a 5-year contract. So they got cut off 30% of the way through. And it doesn't say so in the article, but it's almost certain that this separation is tied to the hack of the medical marijuana program patient data last December, in which over 11,000 patient records were misappropriated. And as a result, this company seems to have gotten some fallout on this. And I say kudos to the state for taking action to, if something doesn't work, let's replace it and fix it with something new.
I actually did not expect them to go ahead and care enough to replace the entire system. I actually appreciate it. So
yeah, I do. I think the state felt like they got a little bit of a black eye when that happened last year, and so it's good that they're trying to make it right.
I agree.
There's enough negativity regarding marijuana in the state of Nevada. So,
that's for sure.
Nevada wants to have a stellar record, as the harbinger of marijuana, and just like it was the harbinger of gaming in the United States and the world. So they want to be a leader, and so I think they did the right thing.
There you go. All right, we're going to take another quick break and be right back.
Put her hand in mine and said she loved me so very long ago.
Hey, how's it going? You can just throw your name up on the list and we'll get right to you. Yeah, thanks, dude. Thanks for coming in. Let me just clean this spot up and then we'll get right to you. You can hop on up if you're ready. Welcome to the shop. You need a shave too, though, right?
I don't know if I would accept a shave from somebody who's unshaven.
I look like a child when I have a clean-shaven face.
No, I wouldn't want a child cutting my hair. And I'd also need to know that the blades have been sanitized thoroughly.
I can guarantee you that the barbicide is 100% authentic, and these are sanitized tools I'm using.
Well, what is the...
Have you ever gotten a straight razor shave?
Is there any other kind? Stuff smells like Irish Spring.
Brings me back to childhood.
Did you grow up in a chemical plant? Hurry up.
Yeah, well, Now you look like $1 million.
Well, that's your job. I'll be sure and mention your facility during my show tonight.
And welcome back to the show. The federal government has a study that they do every year, actually, called the Samsa Study, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. And I've actually been following this data since about 2006, tracking use of cannabis as in the society. And this is a governmental survey which is taken over the phone, and essentially, the phone rings, you answer the phone, and somebody says, "Hi, I'm from the government, and I'd like to take a survey to ask you about your illicit drug use." And so during that time in the Bush administration, it's not much of a surprise that only 6 to 7% of hardy souls would actually admit that they had smoked pot at some time in their lives or in the last year or the last month. But over the course of the last decade, the usage figures are steadily going up to the point where now roughly 13% of the American population uses cannabis on a semi-regular basis, and that's compared with 17% of the population which smoke tobacco. So the use is getting there fairly close. What does this survey say about kids? Because that's the interesting thing here, Perry.
Well, kind of some surprising data to some and maybe not so surprising to others, but they say that past month's use rates for the 12 to 17 age group decreased by 0.5% from 2015 to 6.5% nationally in 2016. This is the lowest level of marijuana use in this age group since 2002. The data also shows a steady decrease since 2014, when the first states to make marijuana legal for adults began allowing regulated retail sales. Now,
go ahead.
People have kind of theorized that this would happen, but I didn't see it. You know what I mean? I always thought that more access would increase teen use, just because it's like available. Kids want to smoke pot, they can get pot more easily. Seems reasoning, but apparently it's more of like what you were saying a long time ago, like the forbidden fruit idea. Like if you take away the fact that it's kind of cool because it's illegal, or it's like, you're doing something you're not supposed to do. Like once you take that away, it just becomes like anything else.
Right.
And they just stop caring as much, I guess. I'm not exactly...
And surveys are also showing that kids today are not only consuming less marijuana, they are drinking less, they are smoking tobacco less, they are having less unprotected sex. So I think that we are raising a generation of kids who is a little more cautious about some of the things that prior generations maybe used with more abandon.
Is it really lessons learned, or is it good marketing,
or is it just,
it?
oh, well, my parents are smoking, drinking, and screwing around, so I don't want to be like them, so I'm going to be the opposite?
Yeah.
It's always the kids trying to rebel against the parents. What do you think, Bruce? You're the only one here who's got kids.
I don't really know. I am surprised that teen marijuana use is down, but like you said earlier, the benchmark that we had was questionable, because how many people years ago, when the laws were a lot stricter on use, would admit that they were using illicit, legal drugs? So I don't know.
And you're right there in that there is a change in attitude. Last night we had a little meeting over at a restaurant on the West Side, and we sat down. The waiter came over and said, "Hey, can I get y'all a drink? It's still happy hour." And I said to him, "No, we don't drink. We smoke pot." And it was just a flip response, but it's the sort of thing where 10 years ago I can't imagine I ever would have said that in public.
Right.
So it is a changing time, no doubt about it. So we have the government now showing that teen marijuana use is going down, and that's absolutely terrific. And a couple of weeks ago we had talked about this on the show with another article showing how that is dropping. Now, one of the prime reasons that cannabis is illegal is because, well, the kids, we got to take care of the kids, right? Great. And they use that marijuana gateway theory is so worn out. It's been there since the Nixon administration, and there's this theory that if kids try pot, that's going to lead them straight into cocaine, heroin, and annuities that are a bad investment. I don't know, but it's just something that we think is widely discredited. And we have a report from the Benjamin Center for Public Policy Initiatives at the State University of New York, New Paltz campus, which has released its 18th discussion brief entitled The Marijuana Gateway Fallacy. The brief marshals extensive social science evidence to show that the idea that marijuana is a gateway to the use of harder drugs is a myth. The researchers find that the gateway drug theory was advanced and persists in policy discourse for political purposes. Oh my God, what a surprise. And that despite the great and increasing weight of contrary scientific evidence. They also argue that the gateway drug theory has done more social harm than marijuana itself, because it has been used to support drug policies that have diverted attention and resources from the burgeoning opioid crisis. And I got to say, this is something we've talked about on the show, something that I've talked with the Attorney General's office in the state and various legislators, is the fact that for all these years they've been saying pot is a gateway into harder drugs. And the evidence is showing more and more and more that if there's any credibility to the gateway theory, it's that pot can be a gateway out of opioids, out of heavier duty drugs. And so
even the DARE organization, I believe, recently announced that they're dropping their marijuana rhetoric out of their curriculum.
That's outstanding.
And I couldn't believe it. I had to look into it, because I remember coming across this young lady, and she was trying to raise money for DARE, and I gave her a little bit more trouble than I probably should have. And I was just like, you guys tear apart families and this and that and there. And she's just like, no, we're not anti-cannabis anymore. And I'm like, oh, you're full of shit. But really, it's true. Like, and they used to be a strong voice against kids having it, and they're even understanding. Look, they're a bigger fish to fry out there. So it's
absolutely. So it's good to see that that the gateway theory is being knocked down again and again and again through scientific research and logic. But it is a gorgon with 1,000 heads. It is a beast that will not die, because we've been fighting this false argument for years, and it's still alive.
Well, surprisingly enough, Willie Nelson, he supports the gateway drug theory.
How so?
He says that marijuana is the gateway to the refrigerator.
Well, in some ways it is. At least the primrose is along the path. I'm sure about that. So anyway, we have the government saying that pot's a gateway drug, but at the same time now we've got a study that's coming out, and this article is written by Steve Carr and from the University of New Mexico, UNM.edu site, and the article is entitled "A Study Finds Legal Cannabis May Reduce the Use of Dangerous Prescription Drugs." And in the article, it talks about effects of legal cannabis access on Schedule 2 to 5 drug prescriptions. And there is a study that's coming out in the Journal of American Medical Directors Association. And it resulted in insights provided by a pain specialist, also one of the first physicians to authorize the use of cannabis for patients with chronic pain in the state of New Mexico. And they observed that a number of their patients coming back to see them, they did it not only less frequently after enrolling in the New Mexico medical cannabis program, but anecdotally they would often claim that they were not only reducing their pain medications, but other types of prescription medications as well. They compared 83 chronic pain patients who enrolled in the New Mexico medical cannabis program during a 5-year period from April 2010 to October 2015, 42 non-enrolled patients, and they did this over a 24-month period. And they found that not only were a large percentage of them dropping off many of their prescription meds, but amazingly enough, over 90% of them stayed on their new medication. Mm-hmm. So it becomes all that much more effective. So you've got the government admitting now that kids are smoking less. The gateway theory is having another nail in its coffin, and we see that judicious, effective cannabis use can reduce people's reliance on other pharmaceuticals. And to me, the big problem there is damage to kidneys and liver over long term.
There's a statistic here that's listed, and it says our current opioid epidemic is the leading preventable form of death in the United States, killing more people than car accidents and gun violence. Mm-hmm. That's insane. Yeah.
I think the last number I saw was that last year we had 47,000 opioid overdose deaths in this country. God. And so while the administration in Washington dithers around on whether to call this a national emergency or a crisis, or Capitol Hill not taking a whole lot of action on this, and even here in the state of Nevada over the last couple of legislative sessions, there have been bills championed by the governor and the first lady on the opioid addiction crisis. But even those are not seeming to stem the tide at this point.
And not only that, but there are no good solutions, in my opinion. You try to restrict the flow of opioids by targeting the doctors or the suppliers, and then what you end up doing is
pushing
taking
people
away
heroin.
Well, and not only that, you push people to harder drugs, you push it to heroin, which is cheaper, but what you end up doing is you affect the people who actually need it. The real chronic pain patients are now unable or have a much more difficult time accessing the medicine they need because of these restrictive laws, and no one ends up winning. Everyone ends up losing. I mean, the intent is there. They weren't trying to hurt patients, but it's just unintended consequences, I feel like.
There's another important quote by the author of the study, and it reads, "No one has ever died from smoking too much cannabis. Therefore, the relative safety and efficacy of using cannabis in comparison to that of the other scheduled medications should be taken by the health providers and legislators, and may very well to have been considered by the patients in our study."
Yep. This is something where getting back to what Perry said as kind of unintended consequences, no good outcomes. It is difficult because this is a pendulum that swings back and forth in this country every 10 to 15 years about treating pain, not treating it enough, treating it too much, causing addiction, and I have nothing but sympathy for the people who are in chronic pain and need something like this on a day-to-day basis. That being said, almost any medication you take it on a regular basis, you're going to develop tolerances and are going to need higher dosages to keep things to keep it effective, and that's in pharmaceutical medications. Apparently, though, in cannabis, because of the complex nature of the cannabinoid and terpene salad in there, that if you get tolerant of one strain, you just mix it up going to another strain, and you get your effect, and you don't have those tolerance problems.
I think the pendulum is done swinging back. I think it's only going to continue to swing in the favor of reduced opioid addiction. You hear about it all the time, and also recently you hear about individuals who have either acute back pain or chronic back pain. Healthcare providers are trying to persuade insurance companies to coverage to provide medical coverage under the insurance policies for yoga and Pilates and other physical therapy regimens instead of these opioid or use of prescription drugs.
And I agree that, or I'll suggest that that to your point, I think probably half of all Americans are not nearly as active as they need to be to stay healthy, and when you're not and I've found from personal experience now that when you're not moving in the morning or something like that, your arthritis hurts a hell of a lot more than once you get yourself going. And so there's going to have to be, I think, a very comprehensive approach in this country to dealing with this crisis. So, well, let's take another quick break.
Crazy Terry here with your car care tip of the day. So it's not a bad idea every now and then to check your battery. If you don't know how to do it, have somebody check it for you. Just a visual inspection can tell you a lot about your battery. So as we can see here, this battery's got a hold down. It's nice and tight. The cables are on. They don't look bad. We've got a cover. We don't see any corrosion. Everything's kind of tight, looking good. A little bit of dirt, that's normal, but nothing's leaking. No real cause for alarm here. So that's a good sign. Doesn't mean it's good, but at least visually we know that it's intact. Okay, so we're looking at a battery here that shows signs of corrosion. We want to test that battery to make sure it's good. Usually when they're getting like this, there's going to be a problem, leaking some acid at the top. We ran the test and we find out it has 396 cold cranking amps, but the battery requires 650. So it's just not enough. The battery is going to go soon. Better to know now than later. Okay, so the benefits of checking the cable is because this cable's rotted out. What we'll find is this is the problem, not the battery. So it'll save you from buying a battery, still having the no start, only to find out that it's a cable. This type of corrosion is common in diesels. Okay, so we're getting ready to jump the car, but we have to have some battery cables. And we have to check those too before we hook them up to the battery. So here we have our standard set of battery cables. We just look them over, see if the ends are frayed, if everything's connected all right. Everything looks good here. Wouldn't hurt to check the rest of the cable just to make sure the dog didn't get it and chew it up. We have red and black. Red's positive, black's negative. You always want to hook the positive up first and then the negative. And I'll show you how that's done right now. Keep these off to the side so they're not touching each other. Hook up your positive. You can find that right here by the plus sign, the negative sign. Plus is positive, red. Make sure that's securely hooked up. Keeping these away from each other. Hook up your negative cable. Just got to fight it on there. Figure out a way to get it. Wiggle it a little bit so it ensures a good connection. Now you're transferring voltage. If I hit these two together, we're going to spark. Kind of want to avoid that. Won't kill you. Kind of fun. A lot of people think if they can turn the headlights on, the battery's fine. That's not always the case. It takes very little amperage to turn a light on, but it takes a lot of amperage to start the starter. I recommend checking the charging system every oil change. At Sun Valley Automotive, there's never a charge for that. This is Crazy Terry with your car care tip of the day.
All right, so we saw some interesting stuff coming out of Washington just in the past couple of days now, and yesterday actually, and we've been talking about this a little bit amongst ourselves because this is a tale of two senators, as it were. We have two senators in this country who were from very socially conservative deep red Republican states, one being Utah, one being Alabama, and both of these senators themselves were very personally socially conservative. One of them is still in the Senate. The other one has been, using the Peter principle, been bounced up to the Attorney General's slot. And we're talking, of course, about Jeff Sessions there. But the other senator is Orrin Hatch. Hardly a flowering example of liberal progressivity.
No, definitely not.
So he's now introduced a new marijuana research bill, and give us this, Perry. It's his statement is really good.
Well, he got a couple of other senators together, a couple of Democrats, a couple of Republicans. I think Senator from Hawaii, Delaware, and then the Republican Senator Thom Tillis from North Carolina also jumped on board, which is nice to see.
And he's a very conservative guy too. And Senator Gardner from Colorado.
Oh yeah. Well, basically, what Senator Hatch had to say is it's high time to address research into medical marijuana. Our country has experimented with a variety of state solutions without properly delving into the weeds on the effectiveness, safety, dosing, administration, and quality of medical marijuana. All the while, the federal government strains to enforce regulations that sometimes do more harm than good. To be blunt, that's funny, a little pun there, we need to remove the administrative barriers preventing research into medical marijuana, which is I've decided to roll out the Meds Act, which is, he's trying to poke jokes, but really he's making a lot of sense.
I can't believe he wrote that. I don't think he'd know all those puns.
Had a staff write it.
Oh,
Sure.
It was absolutely the staff.
You don't think Orrin Hatch is a toker?
I just
a
midnight toker. No, I don't think so. But it is kind of funny. It's high time to address the research, without properly delving into the weeds, and let's be blunt and roll it. It's good. It's good that they're
the puns
if
are
they can
killing
see
me.
humor in it, at least it lightens it a little bit. But apparently, this bill will encourage more research by streamlining the research registration process, which currently the DEA is the gatekeeper there, and they just essentially sit on any application that comes in, and they don't deny them. They just hold them for review forever. Also, what this will do is make cannabis more available for legitimate scientific and medical research and the commercial production of FDA-approved drugs. Now, to some extent, that's good, and some extent, it's not, because if they're just going to make more of that swag, dirtweed that they're growing down in Mississippi that they provide to the federal patients, nobody wants that, and it's useless. It's based on genetics coming from the 1970s seizures that they've been just growing those same plants, and I hear they don't do too well with it. I think if this bill passes, I would hope that there is a coverage in it for other means of getting those meds, because that's the only way they're going to get high quality meds there.
Or they're going to have to expand that program or try to reintroduce it or something like that. I don't know what the hell the solution is eventually, but it's a step in the right direction for sure.
It sure is. This bill will also require the National Institute on Drug Abuse to develop and publish recommendations for good manufacturing practices for growing and producing marijuana for research. All right, we don't have enough words out there. We need to turn it over to the United States government to tell its citizens how to grow pot.
But what about the potential constitutional crisis if this bill passes? One of the other requirements, it's going to require the Attorney General, Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, to increase the national marijuana quota in a timely manner to meet the changing medical, scientific, and industrial needs for marijuana.
I'm not sure exactly what the federal marijuana quota is. Is that how much everybody's supposed to smoke this year, or
Is that referring to that distribution program?
I think it's probably the amount of pot that farm in Mississippi grows. That's most likely what it is. But the fact that this bill has support from a couple of Democratic senators is hardly surprising. The fact, though, that it has Republican support is a really good sign. And
Republican sponsor.
And in the links that go along with this episode, there are other stories about this issue, and one that had an interview with Thom Tillis, the Republican senator from North Carolina, and he essentially said, "I'm no progressive guy. I don't support legal marijuana for recreational use and all this. However, if we've got things that are helping people and dealing with seizures and pain and all this sort of stuff, we have an absolute obligation to help these people. I'm happy to see that.
I listen to a lot of talk radio on my satellite radio, and I've been listening to some of these interviews with some of these Republican senators on Fox News once in a while, and I heard Huckabee and Ted Cruz on the same thing with Hannity, or it wasn't Hannity, it was one of those guys. But anyway, they were striking a very libertarian tone, considering how conservative those guys traditionally are. And they were talking about just like these weird social issues, and they were just like, yeah, just kind of let people do what they want and stay out of people's business. And I'm like, Jesus, where the hell were you guys a few years ago? But still, it's just like just maybe the party is starting to turn a corner in a little bit as the Democrats are pulled more to the left seemingly on a daily basis, and the Republicans in a way are getting pulled more to the right. Perhaps there's a libertarian streak starting to grow in some of these guys, and the soul is starting to soul search a little bit.
Okay.
I don't know what the hell's going on, but I'm happy about it.
Well, you're listening to this stuff on the right side of the aisle. I probably listen to more stuff on the other side of the aisle, and I see a big fight for the soul of the Democratic Party at this point between people who want to push it in a more progressive Bernie direction and others who are saying that it was exactly that cost the Democrats the 2016 election, because they were going further to the left than the country as a whole wanted, and that the success for the Democratic Party would coming back to the center and pulling people, moderate Republicans who were disaffected by Trump and the right wingers and stuff like that. So and on the Republican side with this, though, you've got the Republican Party essentially fracturing. There has always been a libertarian component, but now you've got the Tea Party caucus and 40 senators there who are the Freedom Caucus, who are not going to go along with the general party, and the moderates who are resigning. A number of them are saying they're not going to run for Congress in 18, and now you have a libertarian faction emerging. So I think Donald Trump has stirred up the pot here, or stirred up both of them, and both parties are trying to figure how to move forward in a Donald Trump era.
Well, I love it, because now, like, Trump's holding me, the Republicans are like, well, I don't want to work with you on this bill. It's like, well, that's fine. I'll just call Schumer and Pelosi over and deal with them directly. If you don't want to work with me, I don't care. It's like, you got to love it. He's just putting the screws to both of them.
Absolutely. Well, we've got time for one more, and I just want to touch on this quickly, especially Bruce. We've been following on and off over a few months about Adam Eidinger, who is in Washington D.C., and he was a guy you might remember. He got arrested after he brought he brought a bunch of pot into was it Jeff Sessions' office? It was Jeff Sessions' office, and then a couple of months later he got arrested for smoking out in front of the Capitol, and he has gone now before federal judges twice on this issue, and apparently both times he prevailed, and he was ready to go to court just a few days ago, and the government was not ready to proceed with the trial. They wanted a delay, and the judge dismissed the case. So here's a guy, he's 2 for 2 on this, and I can't wait to see what he does next, because I think the government will come loaded for bear. Anyway, you can find this story and many others that we didn't have time to get to this week down below the video here on the YouTube channel. Check them out. There's some interesting stuff. We're always trying to find new and relevant things for you. So, Bruce, before we go though, let me just ask: what you were taking a look? What do you think of this case? Is this guy nuts, or is he just being a gadfly and saying that the government is not going to spend the resources going after him?
No, I don't think he's nuts. I mean, according to this article, there were some legal arguments based on religious use of cannabis, which and I don't know what other. Maybe he was making some First Amendment arguments also, but it's not raised in mentioned in this article. So, maybe this judge in her infinite wisdom decided to exercise a little judicial activism and said, you know what, we're not gonna give the government a continuance on this. They're not ready to proceed. Maybe there's been multiple continuances. I don't know. Yep. And for whatever reason, she dropped the charges. So that's
it. That's well, it's nice to know that the judicial branch does have our back sometimes. We hope that they always do, and quite often in this country, the left or the right are disappointed by the results. This one, I think, is a good one.
And maybe in the interest of judicial economy, she's also considered, hey, I've got a very crowded docket. I have a slew of capital murder cases, burglary, all types of more serious criminal cases and civil cases.
She doesn't have the patience or the time for that crap.
Well, I'm thrilled because usually when somebody gets hauled in front of a federal judge, it usually results in guilty.
And maybe this is in his favor. This is a district court. This is a Superior Court judge.
Oh,
this wasn't
okay.
a federal court.
Oh, it's a DC. I thought he was in front of the federal.
DC Superior Court.
Anyway, hey, read the article. Check it out. I think that's about all the time we have.
That's all we got for today. And thank you so much for taking your time to join us. And Bruce, we want to thank you for coming in and come on back. We want to talk more law with you. All right. Take care. We'll see you next time.